I should not be told by the seller what Zillow says their house is worth, because if that happens, then the seller is taking control of the conversation. There are a lot of unintended consequences to taking a listing that you know won't sell, or unrealistic sellers that you know won't participate in the process. And so make sure that you're thinking through all of these pieces.
If the only reason a seller is going to list with you is because the price you set or the price that they set and you're willing to take it, it's probably the wrong deal.
I've seen agents get emotionally distraught over the fact that they have to have a conversation that's not as comfortable with their client, and that should not be the feeling.
Welcome to Signature Buzz, your fast-paced weekly real estate sales meeting.
You ever walk into a listing appointment, run your comps, and your seller says, but Zillow says it's worth more? Yeah, we're going there today. Welcome to the Signature Buzz, the podcast where real estate pros who are done playing guessing games in an unpredictable market. I'm your host, Brandon Roberts, and I'm joined with my co-host and fellow broker and general manager of Signature Real Estate Group, Chris Bishop.
Hey, Brandon.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I gotta say that the last couple of shows, the ones I've been on and the ones I haven't, have been fantastic, and we've had some really incredible people sharing. I don't want to say nuggets because that's something Tom says, but they've been sharing some incredible information with us. And if you're not watching these shows, go back and watch them, because I've been in the business 20 years and I pulled something out of every single one of these episodes that I didn't think of or I wasn't doing in my business that I'm adding in. So make sure that you're doing that, because it's good stuff.
Yeah, I was last week's show was really, really good. We had Larry Kendall from Ninja Sales. He was on. He shared a lot of great information, actually. And we're looking forward to a future date to be announced that we're actually going to have him come out to Vegas and do a Ninja Sales training just for us. So
That's awesome.
We're going to need to fill that room. I think we're going to need about 40 to 50 people in that room, but it's going to be pretty awesome. The other thing is, I want you all to know, all the signature agents are going to get a copy of Ninja Sales. So I'm working with Larry to get a group pricing, and he's given us a tremendous value on those books. So I'll be ordering those, and they'll be coming out. So to go along with the full fee agent, you're also going to get a book of Ninja Sales. So I'm really excited about that.
I got to say, Brandon, you are buying books for the agents, and I'm glad to offer that for 1 month only, I'll be selling bookshelves for your office. So
yeah,
contact me to get your bookshelf.
I'm going to make readers out of you guys yet, But it's funny. You get a hard copy book. There's something about having a hard copy, but then most people are still also buying the audio too. So, but it's good information, and it'll go along with all the training and stuff that we've been rolling out and that we've been doing, and the accountability calls and stuff like that. So, if you haven't picked up your full fee agent book, reach out to me. Let me make sure you get a copy of that. And then we'll make sure you are taken care of with the Ninja Sales book when that comes. So today we're going to dive deep into pricing strategies when the market just doesn't match your seller's expectations. By the end of this episode, you will have the scripts, the mindset, and the confidence to have those tough but crucial price conversations. That's a pretty big challenge there for us, right?
It is.
But I think we can do it. So let's start.
Okay.
What do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about statistics of the market first? I mean, what are you seeing in the market? Are you seeing more inventory? What's going on?
Yeah, so inventory levels are up dramatically. I think we saw a 78% rise, probably a little bit more than that, of the available units without offers, single family wise. And then I think it was like a 90% increase in available condos without offers. So, I mean, when you think about that, there wasn't a lot last year. Like, we only had a month and a half of inventory. And now basically we're at 3 months of inventory. And so, again, to explain that means that if we continue with the sales trend that we have, and every house got an offer based on the statistics that we show, that we have 3 months worth of offers that we can get out of the way. And what's still ironic about this is a traditional market is about 6 months of inventory. Like, they say that, 2 or 3 million people in an area with housing and everything else and a bustling economy and everything, about 6 months is traditional before it's really one way or the other, right? Price really hasn't changed a whole lot. We're still at that 480 median. And so, I mean, $480,000 for a house in Las Vegas, that doesn't sound like a lot if you're from California or you're from New York or some of these high tax areas where they have, they're living on top of each other in high rises. But $480,000 is a lot of money compared to the prices that we have seen over the years.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been a few articles in the Las Vegas Review Journal, and they're talking about prices are increasing in Vegas still. And yeah, I mean, when you look at the median, you're seeing that. But they're also using numbers from March, and saying they're increasing. And so we're in May now. And as you start to look at the stats in April, you start to see that inventory increasing a little bit more. And we're also seeing a lot more price reductions. Mm-hmm. And so what that tells me, in initial stages here is the market's starting to soften as we transition maybe to a little bit more of a buyer's market. We're not there yet, obviously, but it's where agents are having to start to realize that we can't overprice a property like we used to be able to and let the market catch it. Now you've got to be a little bit better at your pricing strategies. Otherwise, your homes are going to sit a little while, right? And then you're going to have the tough price reduction conversations. The other thing to know is I'm talking to a lot of agents, and they're talking about, well, I don't think the home's overpriced because the comps say, right? The comps say, well, that's fine. But when you're using comps that are 60, 90, 120 days old, the market's shifting. And if the market's shifting, you're pricing off old data. So you need to look at what's happening with the pendings a lot more. And you need to look at what the competition is in the area and what that pricing is and making sure you're priced competitively. Would you agree?
Yeah, when we used to look at comps, like I remember being a REO agent for the banks, and when they would list a property, they required you to do a BPO, and I mean it was horrible because it was like 6 pages, it was fine print, and their requirement was you had to find 3 active listings that could be under contract, so they could be pending as well, and then you had to find 3 recent, I mean within a year, 6 months preferred sales, and that was establishing comps, right? What I'm seeing right now is agents have one. They have one property nearby that was on the market that may have sold, and they're using that to establish here are the comps of what I'm seeing. And we were forced to get very creative by going to look in the neighborhood itself. In this subdivision, is there anything that matches? We would go into the tax record because a lot of people don't know that the tax record is like a reverse search of the MLS. You may have properties that sold privately. Where they sold between 2 parties, and that was recorded, but it wasn't put in the MLS. It was recorded in the assessor's office, and so like people aren't searching those. And then I like to cheat a little bit, and I like to go to these aggregators like Zillow and the Trulia and the other sites that post AVM values, and I like to see what they say. I mean, as a realtor member, you get like 4 subscriptions, Realist, RPR. There's like 4 or 5 of them in there. That tell you here's the value that we put on this house, and here's how well we think we valued it. Like I'm seeing some of these that say like 98% accuracy, which they're still wrong, but at least they feel really good about it. But like, why would you not compile all of that data together first to say, okay, here are my comps? And then I think the other thing is like, you're putting what's on the market for resale. Are you really looking at the new homes in the area? Are you really looking at the development in the area? And I think a lot of that's being missed. And all of these builders have websites that they're trying to draw real estate agents to look at. I went in and signed up for all of them so that I can see when things get put on the market, so that when I go to price a home, why would a buyer come buy my house when they can buy it brand new for less? And I think that's one of the things we see with rising inventory levels in the resale market. Builders are cutting costs. Like they're looking to cut expenses. They're looking to offer incentives. I heard a builder last week on a $500,000 house offered $50,000 in incentives because they're competing against more product in the resale market. So you got to take all of that into effect when you say, I'm looking at the comps.
So yeah, it sounds like to me that you're saying that it's not just about looking at the MLS and seeing what's sold there. I mean, you got to do a little bit of research. And, I do go to RPR quite a bit. And I think they're pretty accurate sometimes. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Pretty accurate sometimes.
That's 98%.
Yeah, 98%, just like you said. But that's a good place. And then the other place I always start is where do the sellers feel their home is valued at? Because when you start to go down comps and justify, it's hard to determine what the actual price or the value of a home is. Yeah. And so I like to start with an area there, and you can get that from some of these aggregates. and from the seller where they think, and then you can see if you can even justify that price. But let's say you go into the house, right? You're sitting down with the seller, and you feel, based on the comparables and what you can justify the price, you feel that it's, I don't know, 875, right? 875,000. And the seller says, but Zillow says my home's worth 1 million. I mean, how do you start, or how do you have that conversation with them to get them more realistic or in line with the price?
Well, first off, I should not be told by the seller what Zillow says their house is worth, because if that happens, then the seller is taking control of the conversation. I should go to Zillow and print out those comps for the property. What used to happen with the iBuyers is that a seller would say, well, I talked with Open Door and they'll buy my house for X. Why didn't I walk into the listing appointment with the offer from the iBuyer? I always had the ability to do that. And if that's what they wanted, at least I could facilitate it, and I have the info and I'm controlling what comes out there. I usually try to make it a funny situation, because if I can make you laugh, like ask my wife, if I can make you laugh, I might have a chance. And so like when I go in there, I'm like, can you believe Zillow says this place worth $1 million? Like I want to make it kind of defensive deflector. But a lot of times what's happened is, I've asked the seller, hey, tell me why your home is worth what you think it is. Like, what did you do special to it other than the house that the builder built? Like, did you put in something like, I just recently put in a gate in my backyard that cost me $2,500, and I guarantee the buyer coming to buy my house thinks it was just there. And so, I mean, there are all these things that sellers have done and expensed in their mind about their home, but yet they kept no record of it. They kept no expense of it. And then you meet that one seller who did. I had a lady who had a QuickBooks report, and for the last 5 years on her house, she wrote down every expense of improvement that they did to the home. And believe it or not, we actually justified the price. We said every other home is worth $450. And because of the 30 grand that you put into it, you're worth 480, and the appraiser took it and he actually brought in the value. So, I mean, like, you've got to kind of reconstruct the property and what they have in their mindset before you argue with them about price. And I don't want to say argue, but that's really what a lot of agents do, is they're trying to defend it. I don't argue with them anymore. I just ask them how long they want to wait until they sell their home, because I think that's really the timeline. I mean, that home is worth 875, or it's worth $1 million at a certain point in time. It's just either now or 10 years from now. How long do you want to wait till your house sells, right? And so I think that as you go through this and you construct it, a lot of times they're looking at other properties in the neighborhood too, and they say, oh, the house down the street sold for $1 million. Well, yeah, but they had $300,000 in upgrades you don't have. You want to go down and take a look at it? Like, we can go knock on the door and you can see it. But unless you put them in that position, they're just going to disbelieve everything you say because that's what it says online.
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful, because when you start to, for lack of a better word, argue your point, because I don't think you ever should really argue point, because who sets the price? The seller sets the price, whether it's the seller or not, it's their decision, right? But in their mind, right, that home is worth $1 million because they're emotionally attached to it, and they see the memories and everything else that's gone there and what they put into it. And what we've got to get to a point is that they understand also how the buyers feel, because buyers buy emotionally as well. And they're not emotionally tied to the property, right? They're seeing it differently. And so understanding where the seller's coming from, and then getting them to realize or understand where the buyers are coming in and how they're viewing the property.
Years ago, I learned the hard lesson is you never tell anyone what something is worth. You explain your position of why you think it's going to be that way. Because I've had all the time where a seller says, well, I want 500,000. I think it's worth it. And if I would have gone and said, no, it's only worth 450, you'll never get it, I would have been proven wrong many, many times. The only question really that has to be answered is, how much of my time, money, and energy do I want to waste for taking this listing? Because that's the real question in front of you. If 6 months goes by and you let a seller unrealistically list a property that you know, based on everything you see and every bone in your body, will not happen, because there's no reason any buyer in their right sane mind would pay for it, the only person wasting the most time, money, and energy is the real estate agent, who's paying to market that home, who's paying to give their time. You're actually paying your own money for the seller to be pissed off at you. And if I'm going to go in and do that, why wouldn't I at least have the discussion of, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, listen, it's your money, it's your house, and I want to get you as much as possible. I can't see any reason a buyer would pay this. Can you explain to me why you feel that they would, based on all this information I put in front of you? And there better be a lot of information, because if it's just the criteria comps that you have and you have no other supporting documents, you're probably not going to win that conversation. But like I've had sellers sit down and say, Chris, listen, we want to try it for 1 week. We want to see the activity we get, and then we'll talk about reductions after that. Okay, I'm willing to expense my time, money, and energy for that versus we'll list it. I won't call you for 60 days. And when I finally do talk to you, you're pissed off. No one's seen your home, right? That's what we see a lot as brokers. Most of the time when an agent gets fired, it's because they dug their head in the sand and they said, well, I don't want to talk about price with my client because they're so upset with me. That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. That brings up a good point. It's if you allow the seller to set the price, right? You give them the information and you present the numbers in a way without making them defensive, and then they can make their decision. They set a price. The beautiful thing about them setting a price and you not getting defensive about that or arguing with them is that the fact when it doesn't sell, right, at that price, you don't have to take personal responsibility for that because they set the price. Yep. Well, if you don't have to take personal responsibility for that, that makes it easier for you to have what? Conversations with them about price reductions and stuff. Because if you went in and sold them on a price and that price isn't doing the job, then it becomes more awkward or harder for us to go in and have that price reduction conversation because we were wrong, right? And we have to basically admit that, and that's not always easy for the agent.
I think everyone wants to own the situation and scenario. And that's one of the things that I've had to, I tried to do that when I first started because that's what I thought was the right thing to do. And then I realized that like you said, if I stop taking ownership, that everything is my fault, my problem, my idea. And it's me providing people with great information for them to make informed decisions. And if they want to make that decision, then the question is, am I willing to go along with it? And I'll be honest with you, I've been at a listing appointment. There's no question I'm getting this listing. Like all I have to do is sign the paperwork with them. And they've been so unrealistic on price. The stupidest thing I could do is agree to take a listing. Like they're $200,000 above where they need to be with no rhyme or reason of how it's going to work. And because they've told you, we're not reducing this price. That tells you they have zero motivation to sell that house. They're not involved in it. They're just looking at it financially. They have no emotional attachment. And they're just, every time you're going to ask, they're going to say, no, 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 no. And then what you're going to do is you're going to try to spend more of your money to get that one buyer in California that you think is going to change your life and come in with their lottery money and buy this house that's overpriced. They never show up. They never come. They never call on the sign, right? And I was told by an agent one time, oh, well, you have the sign in the yard. You're going to get some leads. How many buyers do you have calling on your overpriced listings, right? Once they find out about the price, they hang up. And
you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like these are the things, the lies that we tell ourselves because we're so desperate to get a listing that we're willing to take things in those scenarios. And what's funny is for a long time, in the REO days and in corporate relocation, I was rated as an agent on my ability to list a property at a price and then sell the property at that price. And if that was something that you focused on, like if you could know the difference that I'm at a 98% every time, if I list a property, it's going to sell 8 times out of 10 at that price. Could that be a stat that you could share with a seller that would cause you to get the listing over somebody else? And it was. And so that's about effective pricing and strategy to understand, these things do matter.
Yeah. But a lot of times that price is out of our control. But like you said, you taking the listing is totally in your control, right? So when you go into a presentation or you're talking to a seller about selling the home, you're looking to see if there's a deal there. You're looking to see if there's a deal there for you. And then number 3, do you want the deal? Yeah. Because there's a lot of times you probably shouldn't take the deal. It's not going to sell. And, when I taught the academy, I always say, should you take an overpriced listing? And you get half the room that says, yes, you should take an overpriced listing. You say, why? Oh, you get a sign, you get calls, you get this. And the other half of the room says, no, you shouldn't because you're wasting your money, you're wasting your time, it's never going to sell. And the true answer is it depends. Yeah, but it depends on what? It depends on the motivation, right? If there is a high level of motivation, then they'll get realistic about price eventually, right? But again, you have to be honest with them up front and go through that process. But if there's zero motivation, that might be a reason to walk.
Not only that, but think about it from your database perspective. You got this referral because someone in your database said, Chris is the guy to call to list this house, right? And all they know is they referred you to their friend. And then you go out there and you screw up the listing and their friend stops talking to them. And the thing that gets back is, well, Chris came out and he listed the house and it never sold. So we fired Chris. Do you think you're getting any more referrals from that person in your database? So like there are a lot of unintended consequences to taking a listing that you know won't sell, or unrealistic sellers that you know won't participate in the process. And so like make sure that you're thinking through all of these pieces, because I have had that happen, unfortunately, where they said, well, Chris didn't sell a home and I shouldn't have taken the listing. I knew I shouldn't have taken the listing. Everyone told me not to take the listing. So I took the listing, and then I wound up in that scenario. And I don't want to beat this horse to death, but it's the point of you're the business professional, like you said, that's making choices on what you spend your time on. If I hadn't taken that listing and I had done the right thing and gone back to my office and prospected, I would have found a motivated seller who would have sold. And so like, that's kind of the point, right?
So why'd you take the listing?
I don't know. It seemed like a good idea.
I know why, because you needed the deal, right?
Yeah,
We get this competitive thing in front of us, and when we go into a presentation, we want to get it right, and we get it at all costs. Whether it means reducing our commission or promising things that you know you're not going to be able to deliver or whatever, you just want to win at all costs, and that's the wrong attitude to go in with.
I had the lockbox on the front door. Figured it was a good idea.
My key had died.
Exactly. So let's talk about perspective when it comes to pricing homes. And I think this is one of the things that you need to do with your seller every time you take a listing is if you can't explain to a buyer why this home is priced effectively, why it's a good buy, how do you ever hope to sell it? And so if you can't do the same thing with your seller, that's also a problem. So what I like to do is I like to take a range. Like let's say the price, like you just said, is $875. I like to go from 800 to $1 million. And I like to pull out, maybe a mile or 2 miles in a radius around that home. I like to keep it, like kind product. If it's a 1-story, I look at 1-stories. If it's got a pool, I look at properties with a pool. And I look at resell and new homes, and I pull up all the competition that's in the area. And I want to get visual representations of these properties. So if it's a listing in the MLS, I'm going to print out the full photo view of the client detail view so they can see it. I've gone to properties and actually taken photos. It's a little weird when you're there doing that, but you can go and tour properties that are listed. It's a good idea. And I try to compile information so that when we're sitting at the table and they're looking to price their home, I say, listen, I acted as the perfect buyer for your house just for this reason. I wanted to give you all the information, and here's some of the product that I could buy, and here's your house. Now, let me ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know this, your home, you spent a lot of time, money, and energy in it. Would you buy your home first, or would you buy these other products because of these reasons? And usually, when you present something like that and you don't demean them and you don't treat them like children, but you just ask a good question with good information, wow, you're right. I wouldn't buy my house. I've had a seller with a property in the neighborhood that's a like model match where it's exactly the same house. And they're like, well, they're priced a little bit below us, but we're going to stay where we're at. I've gotten them out of their house. I've walked them down and we've toured that property. And they're like, yeah, we need to reduce our price. This home's way nicer than ours. Until you actually put them in that home, people are pretty unrealistic, but that's a huge strategy to get your price.
Well, you said something very important in there, and you asked them a question, right? Would you buy your home or would you buy this because of the others, which causes them to stop and think.
Yeah.
And when they think, then they can logically come to a conclusion, and it's not you telling them. Because if you're telling them, they may not be listening, especially if they don't feel like you've heard them or understand where they're coming from. What would be some other questions you might ask them to get them to think? What comes to my mind right off the bat would be, what would happen if the perfect buyer for your home, criteria, willing to pay a price, everything else, did not come into your home because we were just priced just outside the market? What would that do?
Yeah, no, it would cause my whole perspective to change. You said something that's interesting. Would I be wrong in assuming that you've already seen all the homes for sale in your neighborhood? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, we hear this all the time as brokers. I held an open house and the only person that showed up was a seller down the street. Wouldn't you want to know if your sellers have already been in these properties so that when you talk about them knowing that they've already seen them? I wouldn't want to be caught in a conversation and not know that they've been in that house. And so I think that spending a little bit more time investigating the neighborhood and what they've already done and the background behind it could lead you to getting the listing because nobody else asked that question, right? And I don't want to say I'm like Inspector Gadget, but the whole idea is that I'm doing research and I'm using these tools that I have. One of the best tools that you provided to the agents here at Signature is Real Scout. Real Scout actually has a pricing tier system that tells me where the buyers are sitting that are looking in that area for the agents who put them in their database. I've used that effectively to get price reductions and to price homes because it'll tell me a bracket that if we reduce the price 3%, there's 20% more buyers. I mean, like, why would you not use all this analytical information? I understand if you're not an analytical person, but still it's at your fingertips. Why would you not have it with you when you're at the property, discussing price with them? I'm not afraid to spend 20 minutes talking about price because if we're doing that, I'm probably getting this listing. Like, why would you argue with me or go back and forth about price if you weren't like buying what I'm selling? Right. And I guarantee you most agents don't talk about it because that second thing after the commission is the price. Oh, crap, they cut my commission. Now they're going to cut the price or they're going to overprice the house. I mean, we see that a lot.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is that being prepared for the pricing discussion is key. Like if you come in unprepared, it's going to make it that much harder to walk that seller through the process, to give them the information that they need so that they can make their decision on the price that they want to set. The other thing to understand is if the only reason a seller is going to list with you is because the price you set or the price that they set and you're willing to take it, it's probably the wrong deal.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. And I've heard a lot of agents say things like, well, there's no comps. It's a custom home. I don't know where to price the property. And so I just want to talk about that for one quick second, because this leads back to the conversation piece of research and information. Now, if you actually find a house, and there are those houses out there, custom estates that are built in wild runoff areas where no one's selling anything else, I go to the buyer side of it first. Like, okay, if I'm a buyer and I got this money, would I buy this in this area for this location? That's a way to back into the price of the property, right? So you look at that. And then worst case scenario, like absolutely worst case, craziest thing that could happen. No one ever said that you couldn't go get an appraiser to come out and do an appraisal on this property. Like if I'm looking at a $2 million house versus a $120,000 condo, if you could find one, there is a reason that I would pay as a real estate agent for an appraisal to be done on the property so I can justify the price to a buyer that's coming to look at the home. Even though it won't apply when they get financing, you still could do that. If you don't want to spend that type of money, because appraisals can go from $400 to $1,200, you could get 3 agents in your office to be as confused as you are. You could go in and say, hey, listen, if you were going to go take this listing appointment, what would you price this house at? And you can have them make up many buyer price comparisons to say, hey, I asked 3 top producers in my office what they would value the home at. Here's where this all came together. And then last but not least, this is the worst one, price per square foot. Like you can go in and kind of back out a number of price per square foot. And I understand that that could be crazy wrong in some cases, but at least you're going in with something versus going in with nothing. And I think a lot of times agents get frustrated and they just give up and say, well, I don't know what the price is going to be, whatever they say. There's way too many tools for you to argue that.
If you use price per square foot, at least you have something that you can defend where you came to a price. But what about just going into the seller and saying there are absolutely no comps? And this is really a tough property to price out, right? And so it would probably be in our best interest, or if you're not opposed, I would recommend that you hire an appraiser to come out and give us a more accurate pricing, because here's the thing, like, we got to get past the point that people aren't listing with you only because you can set a price. They know what price is. They can find the price. They can get 15 agents to come over tomorrow and give them prices, right? They're going to list with you because they trust you, right? And you're their advisor. And if you're upfront and honest with them, I can't price this. Like, I don't feel comfortable giving you a price that's going to be there. I'd hate to underprice this home. And go through that process and be honest with them. We don't have to have all the answers. We just need to know how to have the conversations.
I think that you said an important word, trust. But how is it that you build trust with someone you just met 5 minutes ago that you don't know that well? And I think that what I've learned is you don't have to have the right answer. You have to have certain scenarios for them to choose from. Like if you're making a decision, like you're going to buy something or sell something, and I give you 3 possible scenarios that you could pick from, and you as the client are now making an informed decision, that's how you build trust with me. Like, wow, Chris always has a way for us to go. Chris always has some solutions for us to choose from. Let's call Chris. That's how I build trust with my clients, because I don't tell them what to do. And I've had clients say, well, what would you do? Man, I don't know. I probably would find a great professional like me to help out and to give some good scenarios, right? But like the whole idea is that you could do one of three things. We could get the appraiser. He can come out. We're going to charge $400-$500. I'm willing to participate in that because it's a bit value both of us. We could just randomly price the home. Which number do you want to pick? Or we could wait and look at all of the properties around the area, go out and make some tours and see what we see. Like those are three scenarios that we could. Which one do you want to do? And when they say, "Well, Chris, we like this one," they now trust in what you say because you're helping them make decisions. And I think that's what agents are sometimes afraid of. That, like they're afraid they're going to look stupid. Or I try to throw in a really stupid scenario sometimes just to see. And yeah. Why not? But I think that you shouldn't be afraid of that at all. I think that's what a good agent would do, like you said, and it builds trust.
Yeah, it does build trust. But I think if you're getting there and you show up at the house and you jump right into pricing and stuff like that, and you're trying to build trust at that point, it's too late.
Yeah.
We need to back up and start to build trust way back in trying to understand them and understand what their goals are and their dreams and all that stuff. So trust develops way back then, but by asking questions through the process, you start to develop trust and they start to feel heard. And then when they ask me for my opinion, there's a lot of us would just jump in and say, "Hey, I would do this or I would do that." First of all, I try to get to what they want to do, right? And if they keep pushing, I would say, "Well, if it were me, this is what I would do. But it's not me, it's you, and it's your decision. So what would you like to do?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And put it back on them because it is their decision. I had one this morning. She texted me and we're doing a rental. We listed a rental for her, right? Tenant placement, and we've got it priced a little bit high. And she said, she sent me a message today because she's moved back to China, and she says, "Any interest in my property?" So we haven't had any applications, getting a few showings, but we haven't had any applications as of yet. So she says, "Do you think we should lower the price? If you do, go ahead. I trust you." Yeah, no.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh. So I would say what I would do if it were me, but it's not me, it's you. So what would you like to do? And then she responded. So we're reducing the price, but it's at her price, right? Not mine.
So let's fast forward that I got the listing. Now I've got this listing. It's adequately priced. Here are a couple of things that I think that agents should do when you get a listing. Number one, what did you promise in the listing appointment? Like, I think that some of us get diarrhea of the mouth and we just start saying all the things we're going to do. This is where you have to perform. So like, if you're not going to do something, if you're not going to hold 35 open houses, don't talk about them at the listing appointment. But if you are going to hold them and you are going to talk about it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be you. It just means it has to be your team or your office or your company. But like, do what you say you're going to do, because the path to hell with a listing is not doing what you say you're going to do. And many times, and this is true every time it's happened as a broker, when a client calls up upset wanting their listing release, it always comes down to my agent didn't communicate with me and I didn't see them do anything. Even though the agent may have been doing something, they have the perspective and feel that you didn't do anything. And so I think it's really, really important not to overpromise. And it's really, really important that if you're going to say, I'm going to door knock the neighborhood and I'm going to call the neighborhood and I'm going to hold open houses and I'm going to do some marketing, number one, do it. And number two, share with them when you're doing it. Like, it's funny, I had an agent who did an entire media campaign about this property. I mean, it was fantastic. Great photos, great positioning, the whole thing. They never once sent any of that to the seller. Like, does that even make sense? Like, you're selling the public on this house and you're selling the seller on your strategy. And so if you're not reaffirming the fact that I'm doing all of these things, then when they come time for a price reduction, they're going to look at you and say, well, why should I reduce the price? You haven't even been working, right? Even though you have, you've been spending your time, money, and energy. So what do you think about that point? How do you sell the message of what you're doing to a client?
Well, first of all, I never sell them on all that stuff to list with me, right? I'm going to go through the process, understand what their needs are, and come to a conclusion that we're going to work together, so to speak, right? So if you've got to convince them to list with you, then you've got to convince them all the way through to stay with you, right? And so I don't overpromise. I wouldn't overpromise because I think it's just a recipe for disaster. But I would communicate all the way through. Everything you do, you need to tell the seller. Because if you don't tell them, what do they think? You're not doing anything, right? What do they think you've done? You've put a sign in the yard, right? You put it across the MLS and you put it on the internet. And that's what they think sells properties, because that's what for sale by owners do, right? That's what they see you do. The other things that you do, you need to tell them you did. And if you don't do that, you're right. In the end, when you come to get that price reduction, or you need to relist that property or extend it because it's about to expire, you're not going to have an opportunity to if you didn't communicate through the process. And it's so hard sometimes to communicate through the process when nothing's happening. And a lot of agents in today's market haven't gone through a slow market where you've had to sit on a house. See, my very first listing never sold because it was way overpriced. But my second listing took 5.5 months to sell. Because when I got my license back in 96, it was a different market. And that's what I learned with. Like, you had to communicate, you had to keep that seller engaged because it was going to be a long process. And we could head to that market shift, right? And so just be in the practice of doing it, because then if the market does slow, you're already in the habit of doing it. And if it doesn't, it's okay. It's not a bad habit to be in.
Yeah. I think the first thing that agents should know is it's not my fault. It's not my fault if I don't own the scenario. It's not my fault the house hasn't sold yet. Because as long as I'm doing the activities that I said I was going to do, and I'm doing the things I should be doing as an agent, and I'm documenting those, which is the really important part, it's not my fault. And so stop taking ownership and responsibility for things that aren't your fault. And so here's what I do know. Unfortunately, some people lie. And sometimes some people lie to themselves, right? So what I started doing because of issues during the listing term and issues with clients is on a weekly basis. And I don't care if nothing happens. I don't care if there hasn't been a showing, a buyer. I don't care if it rained all week in Las Vegas. Every single week on one day of the week, consistently, I send a report to every single one of my sellers that says, here's a complete update on your house. And there are several things, and I'll give them to you so that you have what I put in my report. But it doesn't have to be, a formal document. It just is you explaining to your client in an email, somewhere written, because I'll tell you why it has to be written in a minute. But here are all the things that happen. And sometimes the answers are nothing. And I want to document that I told them nothing happened, because when I'm asking for the price reduction, I say your home didn't get any showings and your home didn't get any offers. Remember when I told you it was overpriced? No one wants to come and see it and no one wants to write on it. But I always put in the number of showings that have taken place. And if it's 0, of course, that's the answer. I put in, did we hold any open houses, or did we do any marketing pieces that caused me to be in the neighborhood? So if I went door knocking, I tell my client, I knocked on 50 doors. I talked to 20 people. They said they didn't know anyone who wants to move in the neighborhood. They said they did. I took a listing from, I want to tell them these things so they know I'm working. I share with them all buyer feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. When the property has a horrible smell in it, sometimes it's hard for you to tell your clients the property smells, but it's really easy for me to tell them what a buyer said. Hey, listen, you won't believe it. This buyer says your home smells like cat piss. Did you know that? Right? These are the things you have to do to make that happen. I share with them all the online activity. We have so much at our fingertips. Like Zillow will tell me where the home ranks on a weekly basis. They'll tell me how many saves it had, how many views it had. I can go in the MLS system and I can use the reverse search analytics to tell me how many agents match this property with a client that's on a saved search. I can go into multiple other sites that I'm part of. There's one called List Reports that actually tells me every site, what has happened traffic-wise that you can subscribe to for that same point. I provide them a market update. Here's every listing in the neighborhood. Here's what the listing did this week. So if the home down the street was listed at $450 and we're at $450 and they reduced $10,000 last week, don't you think the client needs to know that? These are the things that you want to give in a market update. I send the overall market update from LVR. I attach it to the bottom of it. Even if they've seen it last week, I send it again. Here's what's happening. I talk about how their listing stacks up to the others. Hey, listen, the one down the street, if you remember, it has the nice pool, sparkling water, looks like a desert oasis. We got dirt in the backyard. Just want to point that out. Different things you should know. I talk about all the other marketing efforts I did, whether it was to my database, please be sending your listings to your database. I mailed the listing out to 500 of my past clients so that they could see the property was there. I did a social media campaign. You may have seen it. I copied you in it. I sent out some mailers, that'll hit your mailbox day after tomorrow. Let me know if you don't see it. And then if it's really bad, if it's really a bad situation, I go to agents in the marketplace, whether they work with me or they work somewhere else. And I say, hey, will you give me some feedback on this listing? And I provide that feedback to the client. And then, of course, I tell them if they got any offers. I remind them of the offers we've had that they rejected. So, that lowball investor that said he buys ugly properties? Well, he found your house and he wrote an offer at 400 and you said no, but I just wanted to remind you we did get an offer, right? Because a lot of times we just get rid of these things and we stop talking about them. And then at the end of the whole email, like at the very, very end, just like Jerry Springer show, I give my final thoughts and I put down a recommendation. And if the property is not selling because of the price, I always recommend a price reduction. I recommend a price reduction between this and this. Let me know how aggressive you want to get. I've actually had a client who every single week wanted to do a price reduction. If I hadn't asked, they would have thought I wasn't doing anything and the home wouldn't have sold. And so like, if there's an opportunity, let's at least show that we're moving towards the marketplace. $2,500 every week is a $10,000 monthly reduction. That's better than 30 days with nothing, right? But at least you're moving towards market itself. But that's just what I do. I've had sellers go to my broker and say, I don't think Chris did anything this week. And I pulled up the 13 emails that I had and I sent it to my broker and to the seller. They're like, oh, I forgot about that. Because like I said, people lie and they lie to themselves a lot.
Yeah, no, it's the communication. I think the documentation is good in a running log. And I always told sellers when I was actively selling that you would hear from me a minimum once a week. I will call you every Friday, right? And give you an update, good, bad, or ugly. And sometimes it was through a voicemail. Sometimes it was voice to voice. But every Friday, I called a follow-up Friday, and that's what I did. And now they would hear from me more than just once a week if there was actually things happening, setting up showings or offers or anything else like that. But a minimum of once a week, I would talk to them. I think you owe that to them. So let's say we get to this point. We've got the listing. We've been keeping them updated. And we've got to have a difficult conversation. We've got to have that price reduction conversation. How do you do that? Do you just do that through text? Do you do that through email?
There's a book called, you can see it here. It's called The Art of Fierce Conversations from Susan Scott. This book was amazing, by the way, and it taught you how to have uncomfortable conversations and some tactics with it. And the biggest thing I got from the book is stop taking everything as your fault. I've seen agents get emotionally distraught over the fact that they have to have a conversation that's not as comfortable with their client. And that should not be the feeling. Like, you should be okay with having these conversations, because at the end of the day, this client is paying you $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 for you to provide the hard advice that they need to move forward. That's why this job is so lucrative. That's why we make such a good amount of money for doing it, because it's not always easy to tell somebody their house smells like cat pee. Or it's not always easy to tell somebody that their home is way overpriced and it's not as wonderful as they think it is. But you have to develop that art of having those conversations. And so, first off, would you want to be broken up with through text? Right? That whole, hey, it's not you, it's me. Get your stuff. That would never work in a text message, and it probably wouldn't work out okay. And so then if you think about it, a phone message is kind of the same thing. Like, I'm not going to leave you a voicemail. Your house is overpriced, call me. Click. That just wouldn't work either. And so I think the worst case scenario should be through Zoom, face to face, being able to see them. During the COVID crisis, we did that a lot. We had Zoom conversations with clients, but take the time to get in your car, drive over to their house, be present at the property and say, listen, I really need to talk with you about the house. I'm really concerned, and I want to know how long you want to carry the cost of this home before we get serious on the price. I would be a bad agent without telling you these things, and I hope you appreciate that. It's not my fault that they overpriced the house. They made that decision. And that's why it's so important during a listing conversation. You say, hey, listen, my job as a good real estate agent is to come to you on a regular basis and tell you strategy to get the home sold, so it's not costing you time, money, and energy. Are you okay with that? And when they say, yeah, you've earned that right. But I would always try to do it in person if possible. I think probably 80% of the time agents do it over the phone with a phone call. If it's not a big deal, like it's a small price reduction or it's just okay. But if it's a big price reduction, why not be in person?
Right. I agree. I think it's a serious conversation that needs to be had. And anytime you have a serious conversation, you try to do it face to face if you can. And like you say, with technology today, Zoom, you can do a lot of stuff. And, what we've been teaching and that with tactical empathy is laying the foundation really and starting off with, I've got some bad news.
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing to say. I am going to tell you, I am antiquated as all hell. This is a property folder that I have. And when I put together all that analytic information for the listing, I kept it. because I wanted to confirm that that information has changed. And so I carry these folders around. That yes, I have them all backed up in the Signature app. Yes, I have all of my files in our DocuSign system. But the point is that when I go back to have that price reduction conversation, I'm going to download new analytics to get the most recent update. I'm going to put them in my little folder, and I'm going to go over to their house and say, we got some stuff to talk about. And I'm going to put it down on the table and say, with all this information, how can we not address the elephant in the room of the price of your home? Like, again, it's not my fault. So like, if they want to say, no, hey, we don't want to reduce the price. Okay. But like, remember when I asked you how much the mortgage payment was and the landscaper and the utilities and the moving costs and the fact that you're commuting to the other side of town for your job? Like, how much is that really costing you every week? Oh, $1,000 a week. We could just reduce the price $5,000 and probably find a buyer for this house. Isn't that worth it to save that? Like, these are real things that happen.
It's funny because if you haven't guessed yet by listening to this show, especially this episode, Chris is an analytic, right? So he makes decisions based off those numbers and stuff. And he called it little folder, based on his folder and the stuff that's in there, and yes, people. I believe people make decisions based on emotion first, and then back it up with logic, right? Back it up with this stuff. So. You need to be prepared. You need to have all the information, like the folder or whatever, because some people need that analytic stuff to be able to see. So you've got to be able to see all the. You got to come in prepared for the conversation in the right headspace, right? And that's part of having it face to face, is showing this is a serious conversation. Like we've got to have this. It's not just a passive thing. It's not like if you want to do it, okay. Like this could determine you getting this home sold and you being able to purchase your new home or move on to whatever you wanted to do. So, in person is the way to do it. Be prepared for it. Go in understanding what they may feel like right off the bat. Like, are they going to be upset? Are they going to be shocked? Are they going to be mad? Or what is it? So you have that, and then also identify the feelings you're having. Because if you are having anxiety with having that conversation, like label those out. What is it? You fear they're going to hate you? They want to fire you? What is it? Put it out there, read it out loud. And Steve, she'll always says, read it out loud because it sounds ridiculous. And you start to see it's ridiculous. And so you can go in and have that conversation in the right way. So the key, though, is to have those conversations, understand that it's still their decision to lower the price or not, but it's your job to be their trust advisor and have the conversation. So whether they reduce or not, you have to have the tough conversation, and you can't be emotionally tied to what they decide, right? Because it's their decision.
I think a lot of times we forget that the reason why we list property isn't just about selling the house. It's about marketing the property to generate new buyers and sellers that are in the area. I mean, every listing I take is an opportunity for me to get other buyers and sellers that aren't in my database. And so I'm motivated. Like, I want my client to know I am motivated to take your listing and tell everybody about it, because that's how I generate new buyers and sellers. And you're going to see me out doing things in the neighborhood for that reason. I'm financially vested in that success. And I hope you understand, I can't just willy-nilly take listings that won't add to that value. And so that's why it's important, that I'm out marketing your home for the benefit of selling the home and earning your commission, and the benefit of generating other deals that would come from it, because I want to show people that I have the ability to make that process happen. I think that you came through a key point, and that's the versatile selling tactic, right? I have to understand the personality style of the person I'm working with. And yes, I'm an analytical, but sometimes I come off as a driver, and sometimes I come off as an amiable, and sometimes I come off as an expressive, because I cater to the person I'm trying to sell. And so it's a great point. I carry my little folder with me, make fun of it again, see what happens. I carry my little folder with me.
That's the driver's side.
But when I get into the house, if it's a driver, I'm just like, drop the price. And they'll say, how much? And I say, well, at least $10,000 to make an effect. Okay. Like, that's it. Like, don't fight them on it. Like, I've actually had that was really easy. Or should we do more? Like, it's okay for them to make fast decisions if that's their personality style. But I think it's the whole point of documentation, knowing a process, going through it. Last thing I'll say on price and the feeling of the house, stop taking it so personal. Like, I don't understand why people get so involved with decisions that I've had a seller scream and yell and be pissed off, and I'm pissed off with them. Like, yeah, it does suck. You got to reduce this price. Man, I hate the market when it does this, right? I'm okay if you want to be pissed off. Now, if you're pissed off and you're going to get mad and start, fighting, we got a problem. Like this listing is going to go somewhere else. And I think that's another point. Like if I go down the road with you 2 or 3 months and you take no action and you have no motivation, why are we keeping these listings? Like you need intervention. You need a broker. You need another agent. You need someone to come in and say, help me through this scenario. And by the way, we're here to help you through that. Like sometimes a third party that's not in the middle of it, providing perspective, can get you to that next step. Do that. Use us to help you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's just you've got to have the conversation. You got to be in front of the people. And another thing I'll say, we've mentioned the word Zillow quite a few times today, and it wasn't to promote their website or to talk negative about their website. I think we use it interchangeably for a lot of the consumer portals. There's a lot of them out there, Realtor.com, even Redfin. There's a lot of them that the consumers are going to. And it's important to utilize those because the consumers are going there, right? And so utilize all the tools that the board gives you, utilize all the tools that the brokerage gives you, utilize all the public tools out there. Come into these conversations prepared. And have the tough conversations. And then like Chris says, don't take it personal. And you got to understand a lot of times when the seller is pissed off or upset, they're venting, right? They're not mad at you. They're mad at the situation. But if they've made the decisions all the way through the process, right, they have to take responsibility. You don't have to. You don't have to take it personally. So those would be my last thoughts. What are yours?
No, I think a lot of times, in the conversation of getting the listing and going through the pricing and handling the objections and then getting to the marketing, I see all these as opportunities. I see them as opportunities for me to hone my skill. I see them as opportunities for me to learn. Like every listing that I didn't sell was an investment I made into my skill building ability, right? Like if that listing didn't sell because I couldn't price it effectively, how many am I going to have before I start pricing effectively? If the listing didn't sell because I didn't market it properly, how many of those listings I'm going to have before I start learning the market, right? And so I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into my skill building ability because I didn't get these properties. And so worst case scenario, learn from the things that are happening. When you go to that listing appointment and they don't pick you, did you ask why? Like, hey, listen, I respect your decision. I wish you all the best. Can you give me a few pointers on how I could have done better to have earned your business? Like, if you're willing to remove your ego out of it and get their opinions and advice and feedback, good or bad or indifferent, you'll only grow as an agent. Instead of assuming this is why they didn't pick me. Oh, they just went with that low fee agent over there. That's not why they did it. There was a problem and you need to articulate what it is. So learn from these issues, stay updated on the marketplace, like know what the stats are, know what's happening. It's not because they're building a stadium. There's a lot of things going on in the economy that are stimulating people to buy and sell in the world right now. And so keep an eye and an ear to the ground on what's happening.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Another fun episode of the Signature Buzz. I always like talking to you, Chris. And if you're a signature agent out there, just know coming up in the next week or two, we will be launching our role play calls on a couple times a week. And we will be role-playing issues like this, pricing conversations, tough conversations, listing presentation conversations, all those kinds of stuff we'll role-play to make us all better. So with that, remember, we're always affirming your success. Thanks for listening.